Adolf Hitler is remembered as one of history's most infamous figures, responsible for untold human suffering and the devastation of Europe. But beyond ideology, war, and politics, there lies a lesser-known question that has fascinated historians for decades. Just how much wealth did Hitler accumulate, and where did it come from? The official narrative often portrays him as a leader with limited personal riches, dependent entirely on the Nazi Party for funding. Yet, documents, testimonies, and post-war investigations reveal a far more complicated and secretive financial network. His personal fortune was vast, but obscured by layers of party contributions, business deals, and hidden assets, both domestic and international. Hitler's wealth did not come from a salary. His official government compensation as Chancellor and later Führer was modest by the standards of his era. Instead, he relied on the Nazi Party, which functioned as a financial engine. Donations poured in from German industrialists who supported his rise for political and strategic reasons. Companies like Krupp, IG Farben, and BMW funneled millions into party coffers, knowing that backing Hitler increased their influence in a future Nazi-controlled Germany. A significant portion of these funds was designated for Hitler's personal use, managed discreetly through trusted associates. While the public saw speeches, rallies, and propaganda events, behind-the-scenes money was flowing into accounts, investments, and real estate under his name or controlled proxies. Luxury properties were a key part of Hitler's holdings. The Berghof in Bavaria became his official residence, but it was just one element of a much broader portfolio that included estates, mountain retreats, and properties acquired under questionable legal pretenses from Jewish owners and other marginalized populations. Artworks and antiques seized by the Nazi regime were also considered part of his personal collection. Though these items were often documented as state property, in practice Hitler exercised full control over them. Nazi officials testified after the war that Hitler personally decided how to allocate valuable paintings, sculptures, and artifacts, many of which were stored in private vaults or hidden in the Alps. The value of these holdings, in today's terms, would amount to hundreds of millions of dollars. Hitler's financial reach extended even beyond Germany. Through front companies and intermediaries, funds were invested in Swiss banks, offshore accounts, and international corporations. These assets were deliberately obscured to prevent detection, ensuring that even high-ranking Nazi officials were often unaware of the full scope of his wealth. Historians estimate that he controlled several dozen bank accounts in Switzerland alone, a practice that was not uncommon among European leaders of the era, but was executed with extreme secrecy in his case. Personal gifts from foreign dignitaries, bribes, and profits from the confiscation of occupied territories added further layers to his fortune. Each of these channels contributed to a system in which Hitler had enormous resources at his disposal, far exceeding what was publicly acknowledged during his lifetime. During World War II, Hitler's wealth expanded dramatically, fueled by the conquest and occupation of Europe. Entire economies fell under Nazi control, and the assets of occupied nations were systematically expropriated. Factories, mines, banks, and private estates were seized, often under the guise of state requisition. Yet much of the value was directed to Hitler and the inner circle. Gold, jewelry, and other valuables were looted from both governments and civilians, especially Jewish families. These assets were funneled into secret accounts, Swiss banks, and investment vehicles that insulated them from oversight. Hitler personally oversaw the collection and redistribution of many treasures, instructing aides to prioritize items he wanted for personal use, from luxurious furnishings to priceless artworks. Despite controlling such vast resources, Hitler maintained a public image of austerity. He rarely discussed his wealth, and propaganda emphasized his dedication to Germany rather than personal gain. This deliberate obscurity ensured that even within the Nazi Party, few fully understood the extent of his holdings. Some high-ranking officials assumed his wealth was moderate, unaware that he had personal control over millions of Reichsmarks, vast property, and art collections. The combination of secrecy, complex financial networks, and wartime chaos made it almost impossible for anyone outside his inner circle to trace the full scope of his fortune. By the end of the war, Allied forces recovered only a fraction of Hitler's assets. Some properties were destroyed, others looted or lost, and much of the wealth he had accumulated vanished without a trace. Swiss bank accounts remained largely untraceable due to strict banking secrecy, and valuables hidden in remote estates or transported across borders were never fully recovered. Post-war investigations estimated Hitler's fortune in today's terms to range from hundreds of millions to over $1 billion, but precise figures remain uncertain. The complexity of his financial network, combined with deliberate concealment and wartime destruction, ensures that the full truth may never be known. Historians now agree that Hitler's wealth was not simply personal greed. It was inseparable from the machinery of the Nazi state. His fortune reflected the systematic exploitation of occupied territories, the cooperation of industrialists, and the extraction of resources from those marginalized or targeted by the regime. Wealth became both a tool and a symbol of power, enabling him to maintain loyalty, fund operations, and live in opulence while millions suffered. Understanding the scale of his fortune forces a deeper reflection on how absolute political control, war, and exploitation can generate personal riches at unimaginable human cost. The enduring mystery of Hitler's wealth is a reminder of how history can obscure truths behind layers of secrecy and propaganda. Even decades later, researchers continue to uncover hidden accounts, lost treasures, and the intricate networks that financed one of the darkest figures in modern history. The question is no longer whether he was rich. He was, but rather how a man could accumulate such vast wealth while leaving so many in ruin, and why the full extent of it remains something the world may never fully know.